Round 1. Free running. Assassin's Creed was one of the first modern franchises to really popularize free running and parkour. It would be wrong to say it was the first game to include heavy parkour elements, after all, platformers are one of the oldest genres, but the free-flowing third-person traversal is something integral to the franchise. But that's not to say it didn't have its problems. Anybody who played the older games will tell you that in the beginning, the platforming was a lot trickier, and it was all too easy to accidentally send Altair or Ezio hurtling to their deaths. The franchise's platforming undoubtedly peaked in Unity and Syndicate, however, thanks to the addition of the free rundown mechanic, making it a lot harder to unalive the characters by mistake. The free running hasn't disappeared in the newer entries, but it has become a lot easier. When Origins released and the series was overhauled, players were shocked that Bayek was now able to climb on practically anything without having to look for obvious handholds. He could even scale flat, sheer cliff faces with ease. This continued into Odyssey, which included a skill to totally remove any fall damage. Some players liked the removal of fall damage, but it does remove any risk or reward from the free running. In our opinion, it's just too easy, and a step back from the platforming formula that was perfected in Unity. That's one of the few things Unity got right. Because the challenge was removed from this important gameplay element, we're going to say Classic AC has the best free running. Round 2. Stealth. Something else that was a lot harder in the older games was stealth. Fundamentally, these are games where you're playing as an assassin. At least, you're supposed to be. And as such, we'd expect you to have to sneak around and take down your targets from the shadows. That's exactly what happens in all the older games, even in games like Black Flag, where Kenway isn't an assassin for most of it. Despite being a cutthroat pirate, Kenway still has to sneak around when he's outgunned. It's true that some missions in the Ezio trilogy where you'd be instantly desynchronized if you were seen were annoying, but he is supposed to be a master assassin, so it makes sense for the story. Meanwhile, Origins and Odyssey almost seem to resent their assassin roots. Though both were set before the creation of the assassins, or hidden ones, Bayek and Cassandra/Alexios still do minimal sneaking even as they hunt down powerful foes. You can play those games stealthily if you want, but it's a tedious process that requires a lot of time and investment into the stealth skill trees. And even then, if you get seen, you might still end up fighting waves upon waves of enemies. Valhalla did try to add stealth back in with the return of the iconic hidden blade and the option for instant assassinations, but it's still a game where you can completely ignore stealth and take the direct approach. Choice is good, but not when it removes the heart of a beloved series, and that's why the classic games clearly have the greatest stealth. Round 3. Combat. With the early games' focus on stealth, actual combat was something you generally wanted to avoid at all costs. It was all too easy to get stuck fighting a dozen guards who kept calling for reinforcements, though this is definitely a problem the newer games share as well. However, the combat system just wasn't very deep. Enemies would all attack one at a time, making the encounters very manageable. And you could chain kills with your counterattacks, taking down multiple enemies by just mashing Y or triangle over and over. Though games like Black Flag did add more dynamic combat, and of course naval combat to the mix, it's pretty clear that combat just wasn't a priority over the more hardcore stealth elements. The newer games, however, went too far in the other direction, as we've already seen. Where the stealth suffered, the moment-to-moment combat was drastically improved in Origins onwards. There were far more weapon types, bow types, elemental attacks, status ailments, and so on, making the combat not only better, but more customizable. And though the newer games definitely didn't introduce skill trees and upgrading your gear, they did double down on it significantly, truly embracing the RPG elements the series has been going towards for years. Whether you like the addition of RPG elements or not is a subjective issue, but it's definitely more fun to take the direct approach in the newer games. That's why they easily take this round. Round 4, Open World.
This must be what Phidias was looking for.
This is a tricky one, and it all hinges on whether you think a bigger open world is always better. The bloated lengths of newer AC games have been a very contentious issue in recent years. Some people think the games are just needlessly large and full of filler, while others like the bang for your buck value you get with 100-hour plus games full of side content, even if the side content isn't always great. But what about the actual open world design? Well, it's definitely close. Older games had sprawling cities full of familiar landmarks getting bigger and better each time, and it's definitely fun to grapple around Victorian London and sail the Jackdaw through the Caribbean. But there's definitely something to be said for ancient Greece and ancient Egypt in particular. Viking England ended up being a bit of a dud thanks to its endless identical fields and almost total lack of recognizable landmarks. Yes, Stonehenge is great, but it's the only really famous landmark the world boasts and is nothing compared to the ancient wonders you get to see while exploring antiquity. Plus, Greece had more environmental diversity. It had dense forests, arid plains, and those beautiful tropical islands. It's rare that an Assassin's Creed game has a world without something to enjoy, but we think the newer games just edge out the competition. Round 5, Story.
But I'm not an assassin. Not anymore.
Yes, your file indicated as much. Something about an escape. Most fortunate for us.
This one is another close call. Assassin's Creed has always kept its audience enthralled with the joint promise of an engaging ongoing story with fantastical elements and just enough historical realism that it's still taken seriously. Both classic and new games keep this formula, though the newer ones do arguably stray a little too far into fantasy territory. It's not like AC was always about realism, but when all mythology is the result of the ancient Isu and every main character becomes a reincarnated Isu of some sort, things get significantly more ridiculous. The mythology affords some awesome boss fights, but it's also often a frustrating distraction from the actual plot. The older games, however, were a lot more about the historical and political intrigue of the day. Though they would end with the characters finding another piece of Eden and talking to a holographic god, a lot of the conflict was rooted in real events like the Crusades, the Borgias, the Age of Piracy, and the British Empire. They also felt more grounded, and the stories were also far more concise, thanks to older games being much shorter. The stories of Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla might be good, but there's just so much filler in the way, and it takes such a long time to actually reach the really interesting parts. The other large ingredient to any AC story is the modern day elements, and there's no getting around the fact that audiences just don't like Layla Hassan all that much. Desmond could be annoying as well, but we still enjoyed catching up with him every so often. It's very close, but we think the older games were more focused and less concerned with the incredibly convoluted lore, making them better narrative experiences.
It is a good life we lead, brother.
The best. May it never change.
And may it never change us.
Is Assassin's Creed with all its components replaced really Assassin's Creed anymore? We don't think so, and that's why the classic games are our winner with a score of 3-2.
Check out these other great clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.